So you can see, we just have like a little file, the timestamp that puts it in there for future purposes. I mean, you can see every image we took was about 10 megs, which is a decent size for an image. You can see all the different data that we have over here, actually. Focal length, ISO, if you get really into photography, but all the DJI, camera model, M3E. This won't, I don't think it'll actually show you the position of it, but you'll see once we put it into drone deploy that it'll capture that. But like, see if we got a good image over the roof. Just an image by itself at 200 feet. So when, like we were saying, when we're talking about that ground sampling distance, 1 pixel was about, what did we say, 1.5 centimeters. So that's where, the less distance that is, the higher quality your image is going to be. And for a payload like this, it's really going to be dependent mainly on your flight altitude. So the lower you are, kind of the crisper your image is going to be. So close.
How far over is it best to be?
The closer the better, but obviously, like we'll see, it just depends how long you want it to process. Those are other things you got to talk with, your client about. What are they expecting? Some of it will affect kind of your accuracy of your mesh, and you'll see. Should get this one cranked in, and then we can kind of chat and answer questions. Let me do this, and then we'll get to some more questions. So I can upload. I'll choose my folder of stuff, my SD card, my Goodwill T folder, open, choose all of our images, so it gets all the metadata. So, based on all those images, that's where, it figured out where the map is going to be created. So I'll just hit create project. Project name, Goodwill, demo. The survey, that gets into kind of more advanced surveying techniques with different coordinate systems and things like that. But for our purposes, we'll just use the default. And so the upload, let's see, I don't know how fast I have decent internet here. Yeah, 4 minutes on the upload. I never saw how big that whole folder was altogether. 1.14 gigs. So, and then what do we say? 106 images. So, not too bad. So we'll let that start to upload and crank. But once you're offsite, the rest is kind of easy. Like a lot of the software does a lot of it these days. So, what other questions we got?
Yes, it'll probably make sense. Like if you're getting something like that, like a building, like a school building, if the building is like maybe 200 feet and you can fly up to 250, it'll probably be best if you put it at maybe 210. That way you'll be able to get like a really
If the building's at 200, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be that close because then your overlap's gonna get weird.
Yeah.
Kind of above the structure. Probably anywhere from 100 to. Because like when you go over a structure, remember you can go 400 above that.
Mm-hmm.
So well, I forget if that was just the tower. It's been a while since I've taken my test too. So I need to get a refresher. So yeah, we got another 2 minutes headed into that. wanna double check that this goes before I started my other one. Yeah, that's Aloft, air control. Also have this bookmark. So you've heard of the DJI kind of being banned on federal projects. It's a very, very real thing. It's all, I think, smoke and mirrors, but there is somebody in Congress trying to essentially ban all DJIs from flying in any kind of airspace in the United States.
Cause they didn't get their kickback money.
Yeah, no shit.
So what's the alternative?
Huh?
What's the alternative?
And American products?
Yeah.
Crappy.
There are, there's a lot more competition now
Yeah.
It's a-
against DJI. There's Autel.
Yeah, the A company.
There's Skydio now. And there's
Parrot?
Parrot. And
Oh.
you talk about our sister company at Duncan Parnell. They get into more like large scale. So they've got drones that are even bigger than that and more expensive than that. UAVs. So yeah, these are all of the ones that we sell. Quantum Systems, Parrot, Inspired Flight, Yellowscan, I think they're just a payload provider. Wingtra is that one, and you can see we just kind of added those logos. DJI. So essentially, so these are the 6 major brands that we kind of represent. And there's just different systems. And in construction, we don't deal a ton with federal agencies. We deal mainly with contractors and they get to deal with them. But a lot of times, on the geospatial side, they're selling to public entities. We have a public safety division, so firefighters are buying them for thermography stuff. Police officers are buying them for accident reconstruction on the highway, things like that. But any of those federal agencies aren't allowed to buy, like Yellowscan, Parrot, DJI. For what we provide, I think like Blue UAS is a big one, so they can get an Inspired Flight, a Wingtra, and I forget what all, it's all politics, unfortunately, but rules you gotta play by, just like Part 107. So we are good on the upload. So essentially, once it's uploaded, I can shut my thing down, go home, my 2-hour drive home. By the time I'm home, this would probably be processed. So for our purposes, we'll dive into the presentation portion, and then we'll kind of come back here and show what the result of our efforts out there was.
How long has it been since you've been involved with drones so far?
Me personally, beginning of the year. I've known about drones. I've been in the construction industry 10 years now. I just never had like a reason to get my Part 107. I got it about 6 months ago, right before the May course that I taught. So yeah, not a ton of experience, but I know enough to be dangerous. So like I said, this is the Mavic 3 or the Matrice 300 with 3 payloads. I think you would never see this kind of in construction. This is a multispectral drone, which I might have a slide on. It does some weird, crazy crap. That I think is the P1. It's essentially a really like a digital SLR on your drone, and I think that one, I forget what it does. There's a ton of different types of sensors. So what we'll talk about today is mainly in vertical construction. I asked permission from Dr. Joe Burgett, who essentially has a whole drone course about, I actually got my Part 107 through him, or through his course. So he teaches to industry, but he also teaches to students, obviously being at Clemson. So, his research is in kind of the applied drone technology. What can you actually do with this stuff? So a lot of this is, based on his research and based on how contractors are using drones to add value. So like we said at the beginning, at the very base level, it can be a flying camera / video recorder, which is great for marketing content. So you talked about, who could you approach, and you can reach out to marketing people and say, hey, do you need drone services to, even if you don't have your own kind of drone kind of flights over construction sites specifically, you can find some stock imagery on the internet and be like this kind of thing. Project update aerial photos, like I said, that's a big one. A lot of owners want to see that. Usually a pretty good requirement from owners. So the other aspect of the flying camera, like we saw kind of, when we took it up and just kind of started zooming in, right, is inspections in hard to reach places, such as this roof right here. So, we can essentially go in and, zoom way in, zoom way in, zoom way in. So this probably wasn't a Mavic 3, judging by how, it may have been. It doesn't look to be that high off the building here, maybe 100 feet off the building, but you can get really close. So Overwatch, you can just do observations without interfering with work. So if you're, you can just kind of like we did, put the bird up and just kind of spy on people, but for safety purposes, right? Hey, if we're doing scaffolding on the outside of the building and I don't want to go, save a little bit of time and don't want to walk over there, I can just walk outside of the job trailer, put it up, get a little bit close, get within where we can see it, and just do a quick safety observation. Hey, are people tied off? Are people, are they, whatever all the OSHA guidelines are for scaffolding or whatever the task is. So the next aspect of that, you can actually do live streaming from, I don't know the exacts of this. Dr. Burgett's done a few of these, where you kind of have a whole crew. He's essentially, they're both flying the drone. He's actually got a VR mask on, so obviously he's got a visual observer. I think one of them is the visual observer. So yeah, you can stream to YouTube. You can basically just capture a video and share that through Procore or Google Drive or whatever. You do Facebook Live. So you can essentially just stream what you're seeing from a drone, which is kind of an interesting use case, but I would say not terribly practical in construction a lot of the time. All right, so what do you do with those images? So this is kind of when we process process all of our images in Drone Deploy. We're gonna see something that looks a little bit more like that. Is this control? I don't know if I can advance this slide now. So you'll see, essentially it's getting common points and mirroring them and getting overlap. So that's essentially what photogrammetry is. You're taking 2D images and you're making a 3D model by capturing, you see Groot here, we're getting an image from this side and an image from that side, and it's it's crazy technology, and there's even, technology past this now with AI, what are they called, NERFs, and I just saw one that's called a Gaussian splat or something. They come up with the dumbest names for it, but I like photogrammetry better. So like we said, the metadata in the photos includes that GPS location, you know, the compass heading, the camera angle, all the images that we did on this one were nadir straight down. So you'll see when we pull up the photogrammetric mesh of what we did, that the building won't be very sharp because you know we didn't get any what we call oblique images. So you'll kind of see the impact of that. You can go ahead and do oblique images. There was a mission type to include obliques. It just takes a little bit longer, more photos, you know, longer time, kind of things like that. Let's see if it, I don't know if you check in on our thing here.
Bread is done.
Right. I don't know if it'll give me a. Thought it might give us. Yeah, that stinks. Just processing. It'll let me know when it's done. And I think it'll actually send me an email. It's kind of nice. So orthomosaic, this is similar, but from that mesh, you know, when you take a photo from above, you know, you kind of get that perspective view. So what an orthomosaic is essentially like, kind of like Google Earth, but even Google Earth, you'll see like the sides of buildings as you kind of pan and tilt. Orthomosaics basically just stitch all those images together and you get a true top-down view, just like you would see in a construction drawing like that or a site work drawing like this. So this is essentially the site work drawing. I think this is on, no, this isn't on Clemson's campus. But yeah, you can start to, instead of doing a logistics plan around what the site is going to look like, you can actually take, you know, we have a lot of customers that bring it into drone deploy and kind of do, because, you know, we all know, especially in the early stages of a project, you know, the site of a construction project is changing weekly, if not daily, sometimes hourly, right? Like, you know, you gotta go out one day of a construction, or the morning of a construction project, you know, and there might not be any concrete, and then you go out in the afternoon and they pour a slab, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So it really just depends. Once you get to the inside of the building, you know, then usually your site work is set, but you can essentially, you know, keep an up-to-date logistics plan, which is important for things like safety. Hey, if there's an accident, or if there's an incident in the building, where's our muster point? Where, you know, where's parking? Where, you know, where's the laydown area for all of the equipment, things like that. So, you know, an updated logistics plan is a good way to sell a customer on. The next thing that we can do with the orthomosaic is essentially do an overlay of our CAD plan directly on top of that, because it's, you know, scaled at a 1-to-1 scale and all that. We can basically go in. You have to get a little bit more exact with some. Well, you can. You know, it just depends how tight you want it to be and, you know, how accurate you want it to be compared to the plan. But you could do that with ground control points and, you know, basically, hey, this is how far I want my CAD to stretch. Otherwise, you know, you can basically just, you know, hey, I've got a footer there and a footer there, and then stretch the CAD plan. But, you know, this kind of helps you to be able to tell, hey, are we, you know, according to the CAD plan, is this the right shape of that footer? Is this footer even there, right? Like, you know, if you're missing a footer, you're probably really screwed on a construction site, and that's a big mistake. But, you know, usually it's things like, hey, you know, this footer got changed in an RFI, or all all of these got changed, or, you know, this retention wall or foundation wall, you know, moved, you know, in a change, and, you know, based on our drone flight, you know, we could see that, you know, it's not correct. Or it is correct, you know, right? Like quality control is an interesting beast. Like if something's right, you kind of want to know that too. It gives you that sense of that peace of mind. So you'll see a little bit more when we get into it. I use 3D models loosely because a true 3D model to me is, you know, like what you see in SketchUp or Revit, you know, modeling programs where you got nice boxes, you know, things are nice and, you know, square and equal and all that. This is what we, you know, it's a mesh, right? It's a triangulated mesh based on just imagery, and they're getting pretty good. You know, this example right here is for stockpiles. So, if, you know, which is a big deal. You know, if you're a site work guy, you know, you want to figure out how much, you know, essentially how much dirt is there. You know, that's going to affect how long it's going to take to get out, with, you know, what size trucks you need, things like that. So you can see that down there, you know, the perimeter, but essentially, you know, the area with the cut and fill volume, you know, there's 2,000 cubic meters of dirt in that pile. So, you know, very important things to know. Other uses for 3D meshes, like we said, the weekly progress photos, 3D as-builts, underground utility as-builts. So, you know, if you've got a lot of site work with what are called duct banks, which are, I don't think, appropriately named because it's confusing, because it's not duct work, it's basically huge electrical conduits. So if you go out to like a data center, if you ever get the opportunity, you know, you've got huge conduits, you know, going from essentially from the street to the building itself, and then they essentially encase them in concrete, mainly for safety and make sure you don't like dig them up, because if you did, you'd probably be dead, because there's that much power essentially in those things. Quantity takeoffs, so, you know, if you wanted to figure out, you know, how many linear feet of fence is on a job, or if for whatever reason you want to figure out how many cars are parked on site per day, you can do a daily flight and then just kind of count cars. You know, that's something, you know, you could do it manually, but you can also do it, I'll show you how to do it in drone deploy. Stormwater documentation, that's kind of a big one depending on your site. You can kind of show the elevation, hey, and water, when this is our current site plan, this is where all the water and the runoff is going to. That becomes pretty important. Pre and post natural disaster documentation, especially on a construction site, or maybe not natural disaster, but if anybody remembers the fire that happened a couple months ago in South Park, on that construction site, you know, hey, because, you know, I did a small stint in claims, construction claims, and, you know, a lot of claims work is basically how good your documentation is. So, you know, I'm not familiar with how that claim is going, but imagine doing a weekly progress, and you can basically, you know, you essentially have to prove how much work you put in place to be able, you know, because that essentially burned to the ground, unfortunately, and you've got to, you know, the insurance company wants to know what the value of that was and all that stuff. So, you know, being able to have something from the air, from the outside, just to show you, you know, how much of the building was done, becomes pretty pertinent. So that's a lot of what construction is CYA, cover your ass. Unfortunately, you know, very litigious industry. And then pre-construction overlay and planning, like we saw with the site logistics plans. Those are, you know, just a couple of things that you can do with the mesh.
Real quick,
Yeah.
the job out in South Park, the construction site, I was doing the progressive photography out there every month. And
Oh,
so
you were?
when
Wow.
the building burned down, they were like, send us what you got.
Exactly. There you go.
From the start all the way up to the end, every month I went out the first of the month to do the northeast, southwest, inner cardinal, and then the video, and then submit it to the client, and then of a sudden it just burned down.
Yeah, I was out there. I had dropped one of my friends off from work, and I seen, you know, the flames in
Yeah,
there.
it was bad. Very bad.
Yep, there it is. I don't know, where we go? So thermal inspections, obviously, you know, thermography is kind of a whole separate study. I recommend Dr. Joe's class. You can actually get a specific certification in thermography, because there's a little bit of intricacy to it. It's not just pulling up this and, you know, pulling up a photo and being like, oh yeah, there's an error here, because you can get, was it false positives, you know, where it looks right, but it's actually, it's actually not right, I don't know. So it gets pretty intricate. You've got to understand how the sensor reads the surface, because it's technically not measuring the temperature of the item, and, you know, all these different things. But from a very high level, you know, thermal envelope is, you know, probably one of the biggest use cases. So different things that you can do with that is like air leakage. So, you know, here it's pretty, you know, you can tell fairly easily, you know, where things, you know, like that pane of glass, you know, if all the panes of glass are yellow and you see one that's blue, that usually means, you know, most commercial buildings, window systems has like some sort of gas in between two, you know, pieces of glass, and if something happens on the installation or throughout the life cycle of the building, and that seal gets broken, that gas ultimately leaks out, which isn't bad. I mean, the bad thing is that the gas is essentially in there to prevent thermal exchange, you know, the sunlight coming in. But if you lose that, then it's basically like breaking the glass from a thermal perspective, right? Maybe not safety and letting people in, but, you know, so, which can obviously have big effects on HVAC, you know, your air conditioning has to work extra hard, things like that. Moisture leakage, so this is from a roof, so you can see missing or insulation that's folded. So the way that bitumen roof is kind of created, you basically just put tiles and then kind of paint tar over them, so you can see if something gets messed up there. You can tell the temperature difference. You know, it looks like they missed that, you know, where it's showing a hot spot. Probably missing some insulation there. And then IFAS, you can actually tell if there's water intrusion behind it. Obviously, water leaks are a big concern in buildings. You know, you can get mold, you can you know, have all sorts of issues. So thermography can kind of, you know, be a way to see that, you know, where you might not see that with the naked eye. Roofing, you know, some of these are same thing, but damage assessment, leaks. So, you know, you'll see a lot of this on old roofs where, you know, maybe the slope isn't great, or there's bubbling or some things like that. You know, it's kind of ponding or pooling on the roof, not near a roof drain. So there's a lot of different use cases. You know, roofing companies are buying more and more drones, especially with thermography, to be able to do roof inspections. And the same thing with you know, being able to kind of see through walls, and not through walls, but behind walls. So this is a black and white thermal image, but you can see where these are grout filled. So you fill the grout in kind of for structural stability in concrete masonry units. And here you can see there's a missing one, and then here it doesn't go all the way up. So this one looks like the building was totally done. So, you know, you kind of want to do this on a consistent basis as your project's being built. You know, especially as a general contractor, you want to make sure that it's being built to spec and to code.
Was that other one showing like a person behind the wall right there to the,
Um,
top right?
I don't think that was behind the wall. This is just kind of showing, an overlay. I think they were standing in front of the wall, but this is basically just showing kind of what, you know, based on just the thermal, cause everything kind of has a thermal capacitance essentially. And so it's just kind of showing where I think the cells are similar to this. This one will, you know, you can see different buildups of, sediment inside of pipes, you know, which is just crazy. So thermography essentially just allows you to see in another dimension things that you're not going to see with the naked eye. And like I said, this is a little bit better imagery around window failures and leaks. So you can see, you know, from just, this is kind of the temperature range. So, you know, everything in blue is kind of in 70s, and then that black is showing where, you know, it's essentially allowing cooler air through there. You know, usually it's gonna look something more like this, where like the entire window pane is like a different color than all the other window panes. So it's important to know. And then another big one is solar. You know, solar panels. So you know, you can identify areas of high resistance. I think this was actually Dr. Joe's house. He had solar panels on his house. He said he did an inspection and saw, you know, there was a little bit of, what do you call it, just variance right there. He actually went into his layout of his solar panels. I guess this is the back end of his system or whatever, and you could see that exact solar panel was capturing 0 watt-hours of energy, which I think he said it was a corroded conductor. So very interesting. He estimated, based on solar panels that he kind of flew around Clemson's campus, that there's probably 20 to 30% that were damaged in some way, which, you know, you pay that much for solar panels for them to just fail. And there's really not, other than maybe tracking it like that, but there's probably some defects that you probably won't even be able to see with that back end that you might only be able to see with a thermal imager. So this is getting into multispectral, which not a ton of use case in construction. There's like a ton of use cases in farming, obviously, and what do you call it? Not a ton, you know, farming, it's crazy. Like, you can have a drone fly and see where the plant health is bad and essentially pinpoint those locations, and then fly another drone with those locations and have it literally spray individual plants with like fertilizer instead of spraying the entire field. It's crazy what they can do with this stuff. Yeah, you can kind of see, like, you know, I guess this is corn or something. But yeah, it essentially has a, you know, a normal image. Each pixel has an RGB, so red, green, blue, but there's another one, and NIR, I forgot what that stands for.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you guys sell the equipment to farmers that will like put chemicals on the actual?
No, we don't. I don't know who. DJI might get into that, you know, because he might. Trying to think if you could put a payload. There might be a payload for like a bigger drone like that, but it's probably even more expensive than that. Because I mean, you're talking, you know, you talk about flight time. Once you put the payload on all that, you're only getting like a 30-minute flight time on that. And so, you know, if you're talking about a huge field and it's got to go to specific areas, so it's probably a lot more of an expensive drone to kind of do that. Probably a couple $100,000 drone to. Maybe not for the data capture side, like that one, you could put a, you know, you can, this one actually, they have, the M3E, which is this one, the M3T, which is the thermal, and then the M3M, which is essentially the multispectral. So from a data capture standpoint, you could use a small drone like that, but yeah, when it comes to actually like, you know, going back out and spraying the drones, really, yeah, really depends.
Yeah, DJI, they got the, is it the Agris T30?
Okay.
Yeah, it's like 15 grand, and it has like a 13-pound payload.
Yeah. I thought that, and figured they were in that business. So yeah, the only, big kind of use case, that Dr. Joe brings up is essentially if you have, in some construction projects, tree preservation is a big deal, and they'll, you know, the owner will write like, don't touch, you know, don't mess up our trees, like if you mess up a tree, we're gonna fine you like $200,000, blah, blah, blah. So it's more of a CYA. He's seen people essentially fly a multispectral inspection at the beginning before they even start construction, because the argument is like, if they can prove that that tree was already dying before they even step their foot on site, they can give that to the owner and say, hey, when this tree dies, it wasn't our fault, it was already dying. So, it was kind of an interesting perspective, but kind of goes back to that CYA, as a contractor, so yeah, that's all on that. Let's see, hopefully our drone map is done.
It's not like it's overcooking.
I know, well, I think that's that thing.
You
Yeah,
just messed with us.
well, it's not, yeah, it's not cooking on here, cause, it's cooking in the cloud. I'm sure there's some servers getting really hot somewhere. Let's see. Still processing? I think there is a sample that we can just kind of start looking at. Look at time. Yeah. Yes, I just started the trial today. It's a 2-week free trial. So if you do get a drone, you can essentially do a bunch of different maps in 14 days and get some free data. But they do have some examples in here, so you know, different things that you can do. You know, basically choose different phases of the construction. You know, so phase 2, you can see was just site work. It'll give you a date. Phase 3. Let me hide all the. Just to show you. So this is kind of that orthomosaic, straight top-down view. Phase 4 is the concrete pad. So this is just showing, you know, annotation. You can show how much concrete was poured. 0.7 acres. I don't know why, what that converts to. I'm sure you can change the units here somewhere. Stockpile volumes. So if I wanted to go into my 3D view, I could just click the model view there. And essentially fly this around. So I think, yeah, so you can kind of pops off the page, shows you kind of the mesh view of what that stockpile has, and then the material volume is 118 cubic yards of, I guess, rock. So yeah, if you needed to find out how many lineal feet of curb and gutter, you know, was done this week, you can essentially go through and see if it'll let me do this on a sample project. No, it won't. all the tools are over here. You basically just click on here, and click around, kinda like you would do a normal quantity takeoff and estimating, except you're not doing it from a PDF plan, you're doing it from the actual image, of the site itself. So you can see, you know, as the building gets built, you can see what that building's looking like. You know, when you dive in close, and this is probably was, you know, not great photogrammetry. And photogrammetry is not really meant to be, you know, a great 3D model. You know, to do that would take a lot of imagery, you know, a lot of images, and it would take, you know, a long time for drone deploy or for anything to really crunch all those images together and kind of spit out a better result. But, you know, overall, this is a great way to get an overall picture. When it comes to LiDAR, so this guy can handle a LiDAR payload, sits below it. The LiDAR payload is a little bit different. LiDAR essentially is, you know, it spits out a laser beam and returns it and finds a distance and essentially puts a point, but it does that millions of times a second. So it basically creates what we call a point cloud. And so it'll allow you to get a little bit more accurate. So, you know, it just kind of looks different. Some people like meshes. They're a little bit more lightweight. LiDAR's usually a lot, you know, kind of a bigger file size, things like that. It's hard to share. Whereas, you know, this is in a web browser. You can share it with, you know, share it with your owner, different project stakeholders, things like that. So yeah, then I think these individual images are just top-down images. I think you can, they even have 360 image payloads. You can essentially put a 360 camera on the top or the bottom. I think sometimes, most of the time they're on the top of the drone. I think I saw somebody put one on an M3E and I was like, those drones, you know, those payloads aren't terribly heavy, but you gotta be careful. Like in part 107, you'll kind of learn about center of gravity and kind of, you know, it's one thing to consider. You don't want to obviously overload the drone. You also don't want to, you know, you don't want to do anything that's kind of past the
Angle of attack.
well, that's more of
PG.
fixed wing, but like, you know, if your center of gravity is here, you don't want to put a payload right on the tip here, because then it's always going to be compensating. So you're, you know, at the worst, you know, it could, you know, catch it off flight and then get totally out of whack and crash. You know, on the easy end, it's probably just going to reduce your battery life because it's always kind of compensating. But I mean, there are, you know, if you look at third-party things, I've seen people essentially strap, like a strap around here, and then either put the 360 camera on top or hang it from the bottom. So just kind of depends. You know, this just I don't think it's officially recommended from DJI. So if you do those types of things and you crash it, I'm pretty sure that's not covered under DJI Care, because that's kind of outside the purview of what they recommend doing. Oh yeah, here's an example of, you know, taking a curbing gutter installed 1,500 lineal feet. It'll actually show kind of the elevation along the run, which is kind of cool. So it's just all that data that's behind the image, right? So, or behind a lot of that's being taken from the 3D model that's created. So, yeah, it's just a good tool. You know, there's other ones out there. Pix4D, PIX4D is another kind of image-based solution. DJI has a program called Terra. It's more for like higher end. It's not cloud-based, so you have to bring down the mesh, and sharing it becomes a little bit difficult. Drone deploy is expensive, but it's a really nice, you can go up here and hit the share button and essentially invite anybody to view the project or do their own takeoffs. So I think you get what different packages are. So the drone deploy packages. Yeah, so individuals, $330 for a month, billed annually. It depends on what you need. If you're just doing everything, things by yourself, that's probably good enough. You might need advanced if you start doing more cut and build, design services, vertical facade inspections, radiometric thermal, so you do thermal imaging in here, ground control point mapping. So, and then project and enterprises, that's probably more for general contractors.
I like how they got, let's talk.
That's funny. Let's have a chat. I would love to sell drone deploy, but I think they don't have a dealer network. They handle everything kind of direct, unfortunately. So it is a very popular one in the construction industry. Pix40 is a good option. Other than that, there's a couple other ones that are kind of out there. So before I forget, do it at the end. I'll pass out.
Drone for everybody.
Yeah. No, hardly. I don't know if you want to buy a drone, but if you have questions, anything like that,
Here, any type of goodwill discount?
Investors, let's talk investors.
Investment, yeah. There's really not, DJI doesn't provide really any discount, and they actually, they frown away from it because it's really like MSRP. If they find out that a dealer is doing discounts and stuff, they dock you and they penalize you for it.
Who's gonna tell?
Huh?
Who's gonna tell?
Who's gonna what?
Who's gonna tell?
Who's gonna tell?
Who's the snitch?
Yeah, right.
I'm not gonna snitch.
Yeah. So yeah, you can see just from a high level, other other industries that they get into, or starting to get into, energy, agriculture. That's where we're talking about. More of that multispectral imagery and things like that. Property management. Other. So,
What does 10K image mean?
let's see if our
What does 10K image mean? I've seen 10K image up there.
no. Back on this page.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I guess it's the next image after 4K.
Oh.
3K image upload per map. Or it might have to do with how the quality of like your orthomosaic. So,
Oh.
yeah, of course they want to charge you more for a higher quality image
Yeah.
export. And those files can get really big. For like a single image is can get huge. This thing's still cranking. Let's see. Projects. Goodwill. Dang. I think I may have done too much. Either that or this one's a trial, so I'm sure they throttled me down. Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, we might The one I did last time is, I lost access to because I had it through a different license and I don't think it's saved. Let's see if I can. Figure out where I put that. Well, I'll show, this is actually a good segue, to show what a LiDAR point cloud looks like from a drone. Forgot what this one was capturing. So you can kind of see from way back, it looks, very similar to photogrammetry, but if I zoom in on one specific area, you can see, and that's kind of over there. It's basically just millions of little points that are, when you zoom out, makes it kind of look like an image or a model. So you can do different things with this one. Start looking at the elevation. So you can see here where there's no returns, no points. Probably means that there's water there because LiDAR doesn't, when it hits water, the laser essentially doesn't come back to the sensor, and so it shows as a gap. So we can kind of tell how tall trees are. So if we're looking for the tallest tree where lightning's going to strike, it's probably going to be that tree, more likely than not. You can see I think there's some power lines in here. So a lot of it depends on how close you are to the object. So, everything that's kind of in the middle here is probably gonna have the most point cloud density. You can see different cars and things like that. So that's kind of what a point cloud looks like. A little bit different, but similar. Intensity kind of shows different materials, so that one you're able to see the road a little bit better than vegetation. And then RGB is kind of like your Google Earth, except you have a little bit more granularity on what you want to see. Well, maybe we'll check on it at the end of the lesson, or maybe I'll have to pay for it. Yeah, it would go through and email me when it's done. Any questions on this stuff? So we'll take a quick break. I'm gonna go get, I'll probably take this back out to my car, and then we'll do a demo of SitePrint, which kind of is the layout robot. Chris could go out there. So it's not exactly drone related, so any other drone related, I mean, we could still answer drone questions out there, but we're kind of wrapping up this portion. Any questions?
I do a quick question. Any insight or words of encouragement you could offer as they take their Part 107 test in a couple weeks? I know they're kind of anxious.
Yeah, any answers? Yeah, just focus on airspace is a big one. Yeah, like reading sectional charts, that's about 25% of it. So knowing that in and out is pretty important. It's been a couple months now, so. But yeah, don't cram for it. I'm sure you guys have practice tests. Just take practice tests. It's not hard. You just take your time, think about it. It's not tricky. you just gotta, they wanna make sure you understand the concepts. So there's, about 25% of the questions are, you know, more, you don't have to look at something or dig terribly deep into analysis, it's more of the concepts, so. It's a good mix, it's not terribly difficult, but just take your time on it. They give you enough time, I forget, I think I got a 92 or something on mine.
Brand.
But I did study, I wanted to make sure my boss, you know, cause I had to do it for my boss, and I wanted to make sure I didn't give him any reason to, you know, to rag on me, or, cause you know, if you fail it, you gotta take it over again, so. So we'll take a quick break, I'll meet you guys, we'll go, over to the, I guess the HVAC kind of outside. I think there's some lights out there. He said we could turn on and we'll do a